Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at LittleAfrica BronxNews. Today, we're honored to have Vanessa Gibson, who is the current City Council woman for District 16 in the Bronx. As you know, with the Meet the Candidate series that we've launched recently, we are interviewing candidates who are running for City Council in the Bronx, who are also running for borough president, as well as the citywide races, which include mayor, comptroller, and public advocate. So for us here at LittleAfrica BronxNews, it's important that, Bronxites get to know more about the people who are running at every level of government. And that's why it's really important for us that we bring this information to you so that you can hear from the candidates themselves how they're going to support and advocate you and all other Bronxites. With that said, I want to welcome Vanessa Gibson, the current council member, former assemblywoman. So Ms. Gibson, thank you so very much for joining us today at LittleAfrica BronxNews. We're so happy to have you here. I know a lot of people know you already, but can you please tell us about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Mona, and thank you for having me on today's show. I really appreciate it. I am Councilmember Vanessa Gibson of District 16 in the Bronx. I represent the residents and families in Claremont Village, Concourse Village, Highbridge, Mount Eden, Morris Heights, and Morrisania. I've had the honor and privilege of serving as the voice for residents at City Hall for the past 7 years. I remember the day I was elected. And next year, at the end of 2021, I will be leaving office due to term limits. Before that, I served for 4 years as the state assembly member for District 77, also in the West Bronx. And I was elected back in 2009 when my predecessor and mentor and second mother, Aurelia Green, left the assembly to become the deputy borough president with Ruben Diaz Jr. when he became Bronx Borough president in 2009. Being an elected official is an honor and a privilege. It's a lot of challenge, but great rewards. It is hard work. It is career oriented. It is a mission. It is a purpose. But for me, it's a calling. People have entrusted me with their vote, with their confidence. And every day I strive to live up to their expectations, to give of myself, to help, to be available and accessible all the time, every day, all day. And, there are times when we don't always agree, but we always have the community in the best interest and in our minds, and certainly all of the work we do. So I'm looking forward to the future. There is a lot of work to do. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit the Bronx like never before. The disproportionate impact on African-American and Latino families is real, and we have to have a real solution to that.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. You mentioned now about the work that you do in the community and engaging the community. And as a city council person and as an assembly woman, you've been in the community. Can you share with our audience more information about initiatives, programs that you've been involved with, that you've supported, that you've advocated for, during your tenure in public service as Assemblywoman and as our current City Council member?
Wow, that's a lot. So when I first got elected to the Assembly in June of 2009, obviously public education is important to me, School District 9 and all of our educators and students are very important. So I've always supported all of the efforts by the UFT, CSA, and our unions supporting quality education. I fought against school closures. I've, supported efforts to invest in our schools by technology and upgrades to the facade and capital work and programs and after school, all the components we know our children need. I represent many tenants that live in multifamily dwellings and buildings in our district. So I've supported rent regulation, MCI reform, IAI, vacancy decontrol, repealing the Erstat law. I've always stood for tenants, supporting them in their efforts to fight against harassment, displacement, gentrification, rising rents, unstable housing. I've been with many, many tenants with like Casa Bronx and Northwest Bronx and tenants and neighbors, everyone, while I was in the assembly. I've also supported a lot of healthcare initiatives like lupus awareness because I've been personally affected knowing family and friends that have lupus. And then coming to the city council, I've been in the forefront a lot more on a lot of efforts because you're a city elected official. So you have to be involved in things. You really don't have much choice. But I was one of the prime sponsors of the Right to Counsel legislation, which guarantees legal representation for families that are eligible facing eviction in housing court. I've led the effort with Mark Levine to provide access for public housing residents as well as seniors, head of household. We're looking to expand it now because when the moratorium is lifted, we know that evictions will be coming. I've also supported school safety reform. I focused on restorative justice and de-escalation, breaking down the pipeline to prison so young people don't feel that they're going to school in a prison, but a school building. I focused on restorative efforts, holistic training, trauma-informed care, wraparound services. I focused on working with electeds to create the mayor's office to prevent gun violence. So we've invested in a crisis management system, which are anti-gun violence advocates that focus on working with young people at risk. I've also led the way on alternatives to incarceration, the ATI and Reentry Coalition. I've done a lot in the city council because a lot needed to be done. And this administration came in 2014 with a real mission after the Bloomberg administration to really take the city to the next level.
You've done a lot.
And much more.
Yes, yes. One of the things that you touched on is that you clearly have been very passionate and committed on is education. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned your work with, that you've worked closely with the United Federation of Teachers, as well as with CSA, which is the Principals Union. So speaking on education right now with the pandemic and our schools, as you know, schools are due to open on September 10th. Mm-hmm. With everything that's going on, both the Teachers Union, both Michael Malru and the Principals Union, Mark Cannizzaro, have publicly come out and said that we are not ready, that they have valid concerns, and both unions have issued out statements stating that the opening of in-person learning in the school, the blended in-person learning module that the Department of Education and Mayor de Blasio have proposed, that they believe that that should be delayed because we are not ready. There are too many unknowns, and there are questions that both unions have asked regarding the school opening that still have not been answered. Mm-hmm. Then of course, we have our educators, our teachers who have also raised concerns. And of course, parents. Parents are concerned about what's going to happen with the schools, and many parents are for delaying and for learning. And of course, we have other people who we understand have to go to work, and they need their children in school. So there isn't exactly a solution to all of this. There isn't a panacea to this. But what is your position on this issue? Do you believe that we should err on the side of caution, as the Teachers Union and the Principals Union is stating? Do you believe that we're ready? And then in addition to that, with the childcare problem, would you be in support of the city and the mayor providing some type of childcare credit or childcare voucher for parents who have to work? The same way as how they're now providing the PEBT card to parents, to every child, and the same way as it is when you're on public assistance and you have to work, the city will pay for childcare. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, is that something also that you'd be in support of? So I know it's a loaded question. It's a whole bunch of questions in that question, but it's all interrelated.
I agree. So let me just say that I think all of the concerns of delaying and opening for September 10th are valid and should be considered. I think the administration, both the mayor and the chancellor, were very slow to close schools in the first place, and yet we're rushing to open them for September 10th. There's nothing in current law that says we have to open September 10th. That's number one. Number two, all options should be on the table. Outside learning, outdoor classroom space should be an option. The option of high school students learning remotely and using those buildings for elementary and middle school students should be an option. Daycare centers should be an option, but also we have to have learning centers. If this is to happen, whatever module you select for your child, who's going to watch your child on those days that you're not physically in school? And those days are not days off. They're still days on where your child still has to learn. Now, we are in a financial crunch. We have no money to hire more teachers, more school nurses, and more staff. It's just not a reality right now when we're facing layoffs October 1st. So parents are raising a lot of concerns. I'm hearing from both sides. I have parents that have the ability to stay home and, teach their children remotely and homeschool, but majority of my parents in School District 9 are working parents, and their jobs are on the line. They need for their children to go to school, but they want it to be in a safe environment. Some of our school buildings are old, the HVAC systems are outdated, and custodians don't have supplies and materials that they need. We're 3 weeks out of September 10th, and we are not ready. So I think UFT and CSA have to keep sounding the alarm on behalf of their members, many of whom are going to opt out and not go back to the classroom, right? Many of them are going to teach remotely, but we don't have a space to backfill those teachers. I'm hearing from principals that every day more teachers get on the special list where you have accommodations. And that list is growing. And many of those teachers are special ed teachers. Special ed teachers are hard to come by, and bilingual teachers, right? So I think, again, we were rushing to open schools for September 10th. And when you look at the other large city school districts like Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, and Albany, they're still doing remote for the fall as well. So I think, we jumped the gun a little bit, and I think we have to slow this down. Yes, there are parents that want their children to go to school, but it has to be a safe environment. The one thing we all have to be very mindful of is we have to prevent a second wave of COVID or anything else that may happen where we're going to be, we're going to be disrupted, we're going to be impacted, and we're going to be affected by another wave of COVID-19.
Yes, no, indeed. And you bring up a very, very important point when it comes to our special education teachers. Yep. And, also, our special education, our, parents of students with IEPs.
Yeah, 75, right?
What's going to happen with them as well. What about, speaking more about the child care voucher, the child care credit, is that something that is doable? Because there is already a system in place with HRA to give the letters or the for parents who are on public assistance to get daycare, to get childcare. Is that something that can be pushed, say, by the city council? Is that something that is doable? Because the parents, even when the kids are not in school for the other 2 or 3 days, where are these children going to be? Because they still need to do the remote learning for those days that they're not in school.
Right. So 2 suggestions I would say. Yes, it's absolutely possible and absolutely doable, because the city, whatever we want to implement, if we need carve-outs from the state or the federal government, we can get that. Just like we created the PEBT program to give credit for families that have children that are school age, we can do the same thing for childcare, ACD vouchers, and other forms of enhanced, I don't want to say sticky voucher, but you get what I'm saying, where it's a special category because of the pandemic, where families that normally are not eligible would be eligible because of a loss of income, because there is a devastation in that household that has caused them to need childcare in the first place. What I've suggested to City Hall is DOE should be talking to DYCD that oversees community centers, beacons, cornerstones, community centers in NYCHA, all of these outlets where we have young people all day, every day. Now, it's been limited because of COVID, but those are safe spaces. Those are continuity of services and a consistent presence where you know your community center in your neighborhood and your child can go there on those off days. But like I said, it's not a day off. So I don't expect my child to be in there playing video games all day, right? They need to do schoolwork. And so we have to find a way to incorporate teachers, educators in those places, because it can't be the community center director, right? Because they can't teach. They don't have the proper credentials. So there has to be a way where DOE works with DYCD, and on those days, we have a mechanism by which a parent can feel my child is still learning, even though they're not physically in a school building.
Yeah, no, I think that is a great idea, and it will help so many parents, because no matter what, even if you select the in-person learning, there are still 2 to 3 days of the week where your child will not be in school, and we still need childcare for those days. So that, you know, that's very good to know. You also mentioned, you know, with COVID, you know, a lot of families are struggling. A lot of families have been struggling to pay the rent. Thank goodness we got this moratorium, or this extension of the moratorium on evictions, which is, you know, which is great. But even after the moratorium has ended, you know, what other relief could be provided to these families? Because the rent is still going to add up while there's this moratorium. So, you know, what may happen is after the moratorium is over, then families are still going to be, you know, evicted or left, you know, become homeless. And we already have a large amount of families with young children, students in the system who are homeless. So is there, you know, are there any solutions that you have in mind that the city council could do, that also, as borough president, you could push for, you could advocate for, to support, you know, to support our families experiencing this hardship?
Right. So I have been a supporter of the governor's efforts to provide the eviction moratorium, but we all understand and know that it's only delaying the inevitable, right? So from March to August, those families that lost income have not been able to pay the rent. So that rent is accumulating month after month on top of late fees and or legal fees, right? So number one, the right to counsel and access to legal representation in housing court is a good component, but it's not going to solve the issue. The reality is many of these families need one-shot deals and they need rent relief. So that's why you've seen housing advocates lobbying Albany legislators in the state about getting like something codified in local law that would provide an actual, you know, strike where you don't have to pay your rent from March to August. That's what they were asking for, because they know delaying the inevitable only means that you are stocked with several $1,000s in unpaid rent. And at the end of the day, we know landlords need rent because they need to operate buildings. And not all landlords are bad. The good small landlords are struggling. Homeowners that rent to tenants are struggling too. And sometimes they don't have a voice. So everyone is struggling overall. The recent announcement by the governor, by DHCR, was a rent relief program that ended, the deadline was the end of July, and it provided some level of protection. It was a first come, first served basis. I don't have the numbers in terms of how many participants benefited from the program, but it was something that at least people had an option on. But I think outside of legal representation, the argument still has to be made that there has to be some sort of a rent relief. That's the only way that you're going to prevent the backlog of rent that is accumulating. And we know that these cases are going to be eviction cases in housing court. And unfortunately, you have unscrupulous landlords that are waiting for housing court to open so they can file the cases and start to evict these families and jack up the rent. That's what some would do, but not all, right? Not all, but some. And we're talking about communities of color, low income families, and families on fixed incomes. Those are the ones most at, risk of displacement, of eviction, and of harassment. So Right to Counsel, Mark Levine and I are looking to push the city on expanding, right? A lot of folks have already been doing work remotely anyway, reaching out to tenants and clients, helping them. We're doing a lot of organizing across the Bronx because harassment is still going on. We still have people living in unstable housing. Those issues did not go away because of COVID. If anything, I think they were further exacerbated.
Yes. No, thank you. Thank you for pushing that legislation, because families are struggling and families are in need, and the rent moratorium really is just delaying the inevitable. And not all landlords are bad, because, like you said, we have a lot of homeowners who have two-family or other multi-family dwellings, small dwellings, that those homeowners, they're struggling as well. So it's not just clear black and white.
Mm-hmm.
Support for both both families and also for those landlords.
Right.
Wonderful. So continuing the discussion on housing. So every year, we get this, usually it's the public advocate office, and very when Tish James was our public advocate, they publish the city's worst landlords. And, we all had an idea, of course, who some of the city's worst landlords are. But the city's, as we all know, the number one city worst landlord is NYCHA, is the city. And, in the Bronx, we have quite a few housing developments. Every winter, we know that there are going to be stories in the news, lack of heat, lack of water, dilapidated apartments, mold, I mean, you name it. And, these tenants, our NYCHA tenants, our NYCHA families, they're struggling and they cannot get these repairs done. And, we all know that the federal government, of course, plays a very big part in this, because there's the funding issue on it as well. But there's also the trickle-down issue, because these tenants, they need their apartments renovated, they need the repairs done, and they need heat and hot water in the winter. So, as a city council member, as well as, an assemblywoman, what do you see as the best way forward for NYCHA? And then in addition to that, we're hearing a lot about privatization, or some type of public-private a model for NYCHA complexes. So could you talk about that a little bit more? How do you see the way forward for NYCHA? And also, if you can touch on what this RAD proposal is, so that our viewers, our audience who do live in NYCHA buildings, so that they can be informed and educated about what is going on, and as well as what their recourse is and what their rights are.
Okay, so I first have to say, just for full disclosure, I have not yet fully reviewed the recent proposal by our chair, Greg Russ. I have heard from some of my tenant leaders that are upset because I believe that there's some form of privatization involved. And obviously, we are always against that for public housing. I agree with you that unfortunately, NYCHA is the biggest slumlord, and we are our own worst enemy. NYCHA over the years has seen serious disinvestment and loss of funding, both capital and operating, from the federal government, from the state government, and now the city. The city in this administration has invested millions and billions of dollars in capital, from roof repairs, boiler replacement, elevator repairs, just major capital projects, but they take years to do. I wish that we can go to Home Depot and buy a boiler for one of my developments, but it doesn't work that way. You have to build out a boiler. So you see these huge temporary boilers that sit on the street, that sit on land, right? I wish it was that easy, but it's not. In my own council district, I have invested $10 million of my capital into NYCHA. Forest, McKinley, Claremont Parkway, Franklin, Clay Avenue, Finley, College, Teller, Hybrid, Sedgwick, Butler, Morris, and Webster. All of my developments have gotten funding from me for something. Cameras, elevators, benches, sprinkler. I mean, I've done everything because if I didn't do it, it wouldn't get done. And I wanted to make sure that we showed residents of NYCHA that they matter and we care about them. There are many working class people that live in public housing. They have a right to live in quality housing just as everyone else does. There are a lot of city workers that live in public housing. So why does NYCHA have to look the way it looks? Why do we have to scream, yell, hoot, holler, get pissed off, have demonstrations just to get basic necessities covered? Heat, hot water, no mold, no lead, an elevator that's actually working. I mean, it's been a nightmare, Mona, and I'm sure people understand and agree. So a couple of the options that NYCHA has tried to identify, because the price tag on the entire portfolio is about $32 billion with a B. And the plans of the RAD conversion, the infill project, the Seniors First, which is development of housing on underutilized NYCHA land, all of that only gets us up to about 12 to 13 billion, right? That's not even a fraction. So we have a long way to go. The reality is NYCHA needs money. Some of the commercial spaces that they still sit on that are vacant, they haven't rented out. Some of the community centers, I had a nursery that closed down years ago and it's still sitting vacant because the conditions are so bad. Nobody wants to rent these places if you give it to them as is. The parking lots, I mean, there's lots of opportunity that NYCHA has that it has to take advantage of. But also from the city level, since I've been on the city for 7 years and I've watched as I chair the subcommittee on capital, NYCHA doesn't spend city dollars as fast as they should because we don't have a deadline. Federal dollars they do because the federal government gives them a timeline by which they have to spend money. So if you don't spend that money is being recouped. So NYCHA spends federal dollars, but they don't spend city dollars as they should. And we roll it over year after year after year. We have to stop that as a city council. We have to give them deadlines and also look at the internal mechanisms, the capital team. What does the design, the architecture team look like? What are we doing to create jobs and fill these vacancies? We're in a hiring freeze right now. So there's a lot of things we can do, but the everyday residents that live in NYCHA have not been satisfied for every reason, and the city has to do better. But we need support from Albany, and we need support from the federal government as well.
No, that's interesting. I did not know about, and I think pretty much almost everybody else didn't know about the fact that you know, NYCHA really doesn't use all of their funding, and it's rolled over.
Yep.
But at the same time, they'll say, well, they don't have enough money to hire the extra personnel to make those apartment repairs, those basic apartment repairs, or get rid of the mold, or renovate, or paint. But the money is there. But the money is there, then that becomes the money also to hire the people. So,
you know, remember, there's a monitor in place, right? Barry Schwartz is the monitor. So every plan NYCHA puts forth has to be approved by the monitor. So the lead plan, the mold removal plan, all of that has to go through a process by which it's approved. So sometimes things do take time, and NYCHA has lost a lot of staff. I think right now they're a little under 12,000 staff, which is not enough. Gardeners, caretakers, the maintenance staff, the supers, you know, the property managers. We're losing staff every day. And if you talk to anyone at NYCHA, they will tell you their volume and their capacity is too much. I have 2 developments that have 1 property manager that we've been fighting to get deconsolidated. Andrew Jackson and Morrisania Air Rights. Small developments, but a lot of problems because the infrastructure is aging. It's old. So they have leaks, they have elevator breakdowns. You know, there's lots of things that are happening, but a lot of this stuff does take time. So I will say to a lot of NYCHA residents, we have to figure out if your development is on the list. We were able to get some money from the Manhattan DA's office for security enhancements, as well as the governor. The governor finally signed off on $450 million back from 2016 that gives us elevators and boilers. So we're getting that at Highbridge Gardens and Butler as an example. But so things are happening. A lot of developments, money is allocated, but the question is, have we spent the money?
Yes. Yeah, and that is the question. And unfortunately, we know the answer, which is we have not. You mentioned now one of the things that that the governor supported and helped implement is security cameras in NYCHA. So, coming on with that and speaking about public safety with everything that's going on, in the city, when it comes to public safety, when it comes to communities' relationship with law enforcement, as well as when it comes to this whole new defund the police movement or push. In the Bronx recently, especially even in District 16, in your district, there has been quite a rise in gun violence. Not just, other crimes, but there's a lot of gun violence. Our young people are dying. For myself, as a mother, as a mother of a 12-year-old boy, it's really scary. And then recently we heard about another situation a couple of days ago, and this was in Brooklyn, where at a gun violence memorial, someone was shot and killed at the memorial. This is like 2 days ago in Brooklyn. So you're going to the memorial and you are shot and killed while lighting a candle. So,
Yes.
This gun violence has exploded in the city, and for parents, for many mothers, for many community members, we're highly concerned about what's going on. And I understand, if I'm not mistaken, you sit on the committee for public safety.
Right.
And there was a very acrimonious, very contentious budget battle because everyone is saying defund the NYPD. What is your position on this whole defund the NYPD, as well as what solutions or recommendations do you have to improve the community's relationship with NYPD and to cultivate healthy relationships between our youth and the NYPD?
That's another loaded question. It's a lot. Yeah. Well, let me just say this. Well, let me say this first, that no matter what neighborhood, what borough, what zip code you live in, everyone has an expectation to be safe. Everyone cares about public safety. It is one of the basic fundamentals of our life. Being a New Yorker, living in New York City, we expect to be safe when we travel to and from, and we are living in New York City. Recently, we've seen a wave of gun violence, too many shootings, and too many innocent, young, Black and brown men and women. And parents have been burying their children like never before. A few weeks ago, we saw a 1-year-old little boy shot in a park in Brooklyn. Unacceptable. When I hear of a 53-year-old man shot playing handball on an evening, I mean, it's disgusting. It's disgusting when you see the level of violence and when you see that the victims all look the same. It is not only a call to action, but we really have to look at what public safety means. For many of our residents, older New Yorkers, that remember years ago when we had high crime, thousands of shootings and homicides back in the 80s and early 90s, it was really bad. And although we're not there now, people think that we're getting to that place again, because they've seen too many shootings every day, all day, another shooting. No one's safe, no one feels safe. Many residents equate public safety with the presence of police, not necessarily cameras, but a body, a police officer, a patrol car, an officer walking the beat, right? The beat cop. They
Yeah.
remember, you know my grandson, you know this, you see what he's
Mm-hmm.
doing, I know you, right? That's what residents wanted to get back to. And that's why we started the NCO program to build on neighborhood-based policing. That was 4 years ago, right? And we've seen success with it. We've seen some turnover with officers going to other units and getting promoted. But recently, a lot of the efforts that we've seen around public safety has started in May with the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And people say, well, that happened in Minneapolis. It didn't happen in New York City, but it could be New York City because across the country, we deal with issues of police violence in many towns like Minneapolis, like New York City, right? There are victims' names we call that are all Black and brown young men of color. There is a problem with that. It doesn't mean all police are bad. It means that we don't like the racist cops that use excessive force, that put their knees in your neck and try to effectuate an arrest. But the majority of the cops are doing great work, but we have to find balance. That's the issue. We got to find balance. How do you support police reform where they change their behavior, support a budget that gives them resources, but also support social services, mental health, healthcare, summer youth, jobs, after school, education, housing, everything that communities of color struggle with. Because years ago, the answer to violence in our communities were more cops, more cops, more cops. But we didn't take care of the root cause of why young people had a gun in the first place, because they need a job, because they're caught up in guns and gangs and violence and crews. Those are the issues that we still face. So that started the crisis management system with organizations like RTG, SOS, Guns Down, Life Up, BRAG, Standing Up to Violence, where they're coming in and they're working with young people. They're giving them a chance, a space, an outlet. We don't talk to young people. We talk at them. We judge them. We criticize them. We don't love on them and support them. So there's a lot of things we have to do. We've always had a wave of crime during the summer, but this summer was off the chain. I've never seen it like this before. And so to me, something's happening. So people say bail reform, criminal justice reform. We let detainees out because of COVID, COVID itself, all these different things. We're doing the blame game. You're at fault. You're at fault. You know what, Mona? We are all responsible. We are all responsible when a mom like Eve Hendricks can lose her 17-year-old son, Brandon Hendricks, because he went to a barbecue on a Sunday afternoon. And now he can't go to college, even though he graduated from high school. And he was a good kid. Good kids get killed too, you know? And so it's a problem. As mothers, as women, we have to protect our children. We have to guide them, but we have to pray for them. We have to make sure that they have options. Young people don't feel they have options. They don't think anyone cares. So there's a lot that we have to do. It's a constant conversation that has evolving pieces, but police are always a part of the conversation, just like community is. Community needs to understand that it's not just police, but we have a role to play too. If you stand on the sideline and let your community fall into destruction, you are just as much a part of the problem instead of being a part of the solution. You don't need a title in front of your name to care. Do something. Help us, help electeds, help NYPD. We need help. We don't claim to know all the answers, right? You can be an educator and still help on public safety. So, you know, we have to find creative ways and solutions to deal with the systemic issues that we've been facing in our communities.
No, indeed. And, you know, this recent spate, this rampant gun violence is really, really scary because whether you're going to a barbecue, whether you're out at the park, like the young, you know, the 1-year-old in Brooklyn shot in the stomach. I mean, to the 1-year-old, the young man shot in the Bronx. Like, I mean, we cannot continue this way. And we need to look at what the root of the problem is. So with everything happening right now with the pandemic, with COVID, you know, another group that has been greatly impacted has been our small businesses, small businesses in the community. And many of these small businesses also employ people from their community. Like a domino. and they're struggling. They're struggling greatly. Recently, Forbes came out with an article a few days ago where it said, nationally, I mean, the number of Black small businesses that have been forced to close due to COVID is just astounding. It's just been devastating to us. And then not too long ago, we also learned that during the pandemic, when it came to, MWBEs, a lot of the MWBEs didn't receive, you know, business from the city, business
Right.
opportunities in the city. Um, so as a city council person, as our city council member, and also, as a borough president candidate, what is your vision? What steps do you plan to take to rebuild the small business community in the Bronx who are suffering and reeling from this COVID pandemic? What programs or services or funding, what can be done to help those businesses? Because the last thing we want to see is a whole bunch of, boarded up stores in our
Right.
community.
Right. Well, small businesses are the backbone and the fabric of our communities, and we don't do enough to support them. And the recent efforts by Small Business Administration as well as the city SBS have really not been comprehensive efforts to reach out to the businesses the most in need. So the eligibility, the criteria, a lot of our small businesses, the owner is the manager, is the bookkeeper, is the accountant. They have multiple roles. They don't have the ability to do the applications. They are not eligible from the onset. So we need a lot of technical assistance for our small businesses. We've been working with the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, and shout out to Lisa Soren, who's doing great work, and all of our bids from 3rd Avenue, 161st Street, White Plains, Tremont, Southern Boulevard. A lot of our bids have been organizing with Zoom calls with SBS, talking about access to PPP, to the loan program. We were very disappointed that the SBS grant and loan opportunities that were recently announced a few weeks ago, less than 5% went to Bronx businesses. That goes to show you a majority went to Manhattan businesses. And more than likely, a lot of Manhattan businesses that may or may not need these loans and grants. We're talking about people who are struggling to meet their bottom line, that have been closed since March. And let me also remind you that when we had the vandalism on June 1st on Burnside and Fordham, a lot of those businesses were devastated. Their items and merchandise were stolen, ATMs, eyeglassware, medicine, pharmacies, banks. It was horrible. So they had to rebound from that and then figure out how to open. A lot of them closed because they simply couldn't meet payroll. They weren't getting enough revenue in, and the restaurants have been struggling. I represent 161st Street near Yankee Stadium, and those businesses cater to the Yankee Major League Baseball season. So without any fans, they're losing tons of revenue, and the courts are closed. So the whole civic area on 161 is like empty, and no one is using the restaurants. So the outdoor dining is a good step, but it's not going to be enough. The winter time's coming. What do? You can't sit outside in 10-degree weather and have dinner, right? So we're going to have to figure out something to do that's safe. Minimal, limited capacity, if it's 50%, whatever that number is. But we also have to do the technical assistance, insurance requirements, capacity building, a lot of those efforts that the bids are already doing. But then we have a lot of businesses that are not associated with the chamber or a bid or a merchants association. So we should try to organize them and work with them, form a working group, and get them up to speed. I cover Jerome Avenue, so that's predominantly auto repair and car services, right? Inspections, tires, mirrors. So many of them are immigrant-owned businesses. Many of them are renters. We have to do more on the commercial tenant side. So I did the commercial tenant harassment bill that puts penalties in place if you are found to harass your commercial tenant, because residential tenants get a lot of protections, but not safeguards for commercial. The commercial leasing program the SBS has, we've been working with SBS on efforts, the mobile unit, doing a lot of outreach and workshops. It's not easy, but we're trying to get a lot of the workers and owners on the ground. We have a lot of work to do, but I think organizing and doing a lot of outreach and talking to them about best practices, new protections, safeguards, what they can do as a business, and really technical support is probably key to make sure that they can rebound and survive.
No, that's true, and it's you know, these small businesses really, especially those not affiliated with the chamber and the bids,
Right.
they need just as much, probably even more, actually, more support. So with you know, with the upcoming borough president's race now in this age of COVID, when it comes to the Bronx, in your closing remarks, what do you envision as your recovery strategy for the Bronx? And how are you going to engage the residents of the Bronx, the community leaders, other stakeholders such as small business owners, and others in this recovery plan, hopefully post-COVID? You know, as Bronx Borough President, what do you envision as the way forward for the Bronx in recovering from what we're experiencing right now?
Right. So my plan is going to be very comprehensive. It's going to look at this from multiple layers. The remainder of my tenure this year and next year is really going to be recovery around COVID, specifically for District 16, but really for the broader Bronx. Some communities were hit much harsher than others because we struggled pre-COVID. I think a number one issue for me, besides jobs and looking at the tech industry and worker co-ops, is going to be healthcare. We are the poorest county in terms of health outcomes. We are number 62 out of all 62 counties in New York State, and that is very telling. We've dealt with health disparities like heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, and asthma. Why do most Bronx residents have asthma? The highest asthma rates in this state. The poorest congressional district is in the South Bronx. Those are statistics that we've lived with for quite a long time, pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. So we have to have a plan that looks at dealing with health disparities. It focuses on urban agriculture, farming, nutrition, health and wellness, fitness, open parks, cycling, mass transportation. It looks at farmers markets, how we can work with supermarkets, bodegas, grocery stores, all of the different outlets, how we can have better options. Why is healthy food so expensive? Why do you have to travel out of the neighborhood just to get healthy food? Why do the supermarkets not offer healthy food today? Those are the issues that people have been complaining about for years. People that physically are able to travel, they can and they will. We don't have a Whole Foods. We don't have a Trader Joe's. We have to look at health food stores. We have to look at other options that bring better scenarios into the Bronx. But for me, it's got to be the mindset. We have to believe that it is possible, that how we live today is not acceptable. And we don't have to accept that. We can do better. We should do better. And we will do better. It's the hardest thing in the world to change somebody's mindset. You can change how they work, their behavior, you can change their space, but the mindset has to be changed. We have to believe that we deserve this, not just for us, but our children. And I, of all people, I know hereditary. I have African-American and Caribbean roots, so we prepare our meals a certain way. I got it, but there's better ways we can look at things. That's why we've been working with Hunger Free America. We've offered nutrition classes. We fund health bucks. I've been working with Department of Health on a Jerome Public Health Task Force. And in September, we're going to launch a series of recommendations. But again, as I mentioned earlier, you can talk about health and wellness. You can talk about access to quality health care, but you also have to talk about stable housing. You can't have a great health care plan and a primary care doctor and live with rats. Just doesn't work, right? And live with mold and lead. So all of those things have to work together. So we're going to be, announcing a series of different efforts and initiatives, but we have to work with partners like Institute for Family Health, Bronx Health Reach. I also want to highlight the high infant mortality rate in the Black community with Black women. 2 Black women recently lost their lives giving birth in Brooklyn and the Bronx. We have to talk about the disparate healthcare treatment that Black and brown women face today. It is unacceptable. We are more likely to die during childbirth, and it's not right. So we have a lot of work to do, right? I don't take any of this lightly, because the work we do now has to have a long-term impact. We have to stand for something, or we will fall for anything. And we have come too far as a borough to allow the COVID-19 pandemic to keep us on the ground, to cripple us. It may have set us back, but remember, a setback is preparation for a comeback. We have to come back stronger than ever, healthier than ever, and more vibrant with jobs, with the economy. We have to build economic wealth in the Black and brown community. Why can't we own property? We don't have to be renters for the rest of our lives. So we have to look at these types of things. So those are a lot of the things. You know me, I'm going to be talking about everything, because everything is important. You can't just focus on one aspect. Everything has to work together for the common goal, which is the health and the overall well-being of every Bronx resident.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Councilmember Gibson, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for, letting us know what your plan is for the Bronx. And, we look forward to hearing more about the initiatives and the efforts to help families right now dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic, families who may be facing evictions, as well as those of us, families with school-age children, because we need those childcare vouchers. However they're going to do it with ACB or, but we need that, and we need a real. So again, thank you so much for joining us here at LittleAfrica BronxNews. And as we say, thank you for everything that you're continuing to do for the community. And we look forward to seeing how everything unfolds with the Bronx Borough President race. But one thing we do know is we know your track record in the community as an assemblywoman, and now as a city councilwoman. And, we know you've always put the interests of the community first. So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Councilmember Vanessa Gibson, Bronx Borough President candidate, Miss Vanessa Gibson. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much to everyone. You know how to find me if you email, Twitter, everything.
Thank you.